You could view the title of this video as audiophile clickbait, and perhaps it is. But in a more charitable frame of mind, you could also view it as directing attention to a novel product that could prove to be highly significant and even a bit disruptive to the high-end audio marketplace. This is Andrew Quint, a senior writer for The Absolute Sound, and I'd like to tell you about new software coming very soon from Theoretica Applied Physics and BACCH Labs called Stratos, as it's something quite unique in my experience. Over the course of the last 50 years, there have been a number of consistent objections regarding multi-channel audio reproduction. What was quadraphonic in the early 1970s, Dolby Surround in the 80s, then the 5.0 and 5.1 capabilities of SACD and DVD audio, and currently object-based formats such as Dolby Atmos and RO3D. There have been complaints about the sound as unnatural or gimmicky, but perhaps more importantly, that the undertaking was too expensive or aesthetically unacceptable. All those extra loudspeakers and electronics were definitely not going to make it into a shared living space. Meanwhile, back on the two-channel front, efforts started in the 1960s to correct a basic defect in stereo reproduction, namely interaural crosstalk. Products from Polk, Carver, and others addressed the issue with methods of crosstalk cancellation, or XTC, but the problem was truly solved definitively by the acoustic scientist Andrew Quint at Princeton University, who developed his BACCH crosstalk cancellation filter, eventually founding Theoretica to manufacture the BACCH SP audio processor, as well as its sister company, BACCH Labs, to, among other things, license the technology as BACCH for Mac. BACCH certainly improved the dimensionality and spatial specificity of two-channel sound, but couldn't compete with the 360-degree envelopment of other surround sound methods. A few years ago, Dr. Quint experimented with emulating the sonic presentation of a multi-channel SACD with two audio channels, employing a combination of a BACCH filter plus individualized head-related binaural measurements made inside an anechoic chamber. I was part of that experiment, visiting Dr. Quint's lab in Princeton and enduring the 15-minute measurement procedure. The results were not especially successful in my room, as the emulation was very susceptible to the room reflections that exist in the real world with most loudspeakers and in most domestic listening environments. Dr. Quint continued his efforts, however, and now he's introducing Stratos, a technology that doesn't require a user to undergo elaborate study in an anechoic chamber, but instead relies on a series of acoustic measurements of frequency sweeps emanating from the stereo pair of loudspeakers deployed in your own listening room. These are performed with the same in-ear microphones developed by the professor for all his BACCH applications, and with the user's head oriented in 7 different directions. The aim is to exactly reproduce specific immersive audio mixes with just 2 speakers. Skeptical? Well, I was too. But recently, Dr. Quint visited my listening room for a demonstration of Stratos, so named because of the perception of vertical layering, or strata, that can result when spatial sound is reproduced well. This was the first trip for Stratos technology outside of Dr. Quint's lab, and the first time Stratos went head-to-head with an actual Atmos system. My current immersive audio system is a 5.1.4 setup. The speakers are all Magicos, a pair of M2s up front, along with an S3 Mark II for the center channel, S1 Mark IIs for the surrounds, an S-Sub subwoofer, and 4 A1 monitors for the height channels. Amplification is provided by gear from Tidal, Pass Labs, and Parasound. The sources are a Sony Universal player for Blu-ray discs with Dolby True HD content, that's not relevant to this discussion, and a Beta's Reference 5 media computer to play MKV files. An Anthem AVM70 decodes the Atmos material. Dr. Schwery first listened for about half an hour to a few of my favorite Atmos selections through my 5.1.4 system, and then set up for playback of the same files with 2-channel Stratos. Here's how Stratos works, with a schematic diagram and screenshots provided by Dr. Schwery. Edgar set up behind the listening position with his laptop running the latest version of BACCH for Mac plus the new Stratos module. First, the laptop was connected with a digital cable to the Anthem processor, the same DAC I use for 5.1.4 Atmos on a daily basis. Next, step 2, Edgar used the BACCH DSP app that's part of the BACCH for Mac suite to make a head-track crosstalk cancellation filter for the front main speakers of my system, the Magico M2s. In step 3, he switched to the Stratos calibrate mode, and we made a series of Stratos filters by repositioning my head several times so that my ears were aimed at the locations of imaginary center, surround, and height speakers. Finally, step 4, Edgar switched to the Stratos listen mode for playback of the 5.1.4 files through just the 2 main front speakers. The entire calibration process is automated in the Stratos software module and took no more than 10 minutes to accomplish. And of course, you only have to do it once, unless you change gear or some other major aspect of your room, such as new furnishing, room treatments, or speaker placement come into play. For comparison with Atmos played through my 10-channel Magico loudspeaker array, I'd intentionally picked musical examples employing different approaches to immersive sound. For example, extravagant electronica from Yellow's Point album, Brendan Heinz's recording of a chamber ensemble playing an arrangement of the finale of Beethoven's Second Symphony on his TRPTK level, and the Canadian jazz singer Dominique Fils-Aimé's evocative Our Roots Run Deep from her 2023 album of the same name. My impression? The sound with 2-channel Stratos was extraordinarily similar in character and quality to what was produced by Full Boat Atmos, and arguably better in some ways. The sense of vertical scale was impressive, and, as with actual 10-speaker Atmos, there was an associated clarification of what was going on sonically at ground level. The 2-channel emulation was only slightly behind in terms of envelopment. Adjustments to virtual speaker levels with the Stratos software improved it to within 10 to 15% of real Atmos. Other audio parameters, such as spatial resolution, tonal consistency, and musical detail, were superior. Perhaps this was no surprise. It was like having an Atmos speaker system where all the speakers were M2s, plus the subwoofer, and the tonality was more refined and consistent across the entire frequency range and acoustic space. Most importantly, there was nothing generic about the immersive mix produced by Stratos. I was hearing the very different production choices made for each recording. These conclusions are preliminary, of course, based on just a few hours of listening before Edgar had to return to Princeton with his cables, laptop microphones, and other gear. But this product is potentially transformative in terms of the interest in immersive sound by more audiophiles who have understandably objected to the sheer impracticability of implementing this sort of sonic aesthetic. We'll have much more to say about Stratos when the product is released in its final form and we've spent more time with it. It will be available first to users of the BACCH for Mac software at an anticipated cost of $2,000, which includes one-on-one setup help. Owners of Theoretica's BACCH SP processor will be able to have the software ported to their device for $3,000. Especially with the recent news about the introduction of high-resolution streaming, Stratos may be of increasing relevance to even the most traditional audiophiles. Thank you for hearing me out about this interesting development, and as always, happy listening in however many channels you choose.